Well, welcome back to my office. Um, so last time we saw some pages magneted. Let me try that again. Last time we saw some pages held on the wall by magnets. The magnetic wall is a bit of a story. Before this office, I had my desk pushed into the corner of a dining room. I really wanted an office really bad, one with a door that I could lock. And when we found this house, I realized that my office was going to be huge. We picked a wall and we made that wall magnetic. It was not easy. When we closed, the first thing we did was we went and bought magnetic paint from Home Depot. We wanted to set my office up as fast as possible. I was halfway through Onslaught of Madness and I needed to finish that book. So we set my office up first. The day we closed, we painted the wall with 4 layers of magnetic tape, magnetic paint. Then we went back home to Milwaukee, and we finished packing up. We came back, the paint was dry and we tested it and it didn't work. And I was like, forget it, just forget it, we won't do it. But she was adamant that it had to happen, because she wanted this office for me as bad as I wanted it. So she painted another four coats. You may not have used this paint before, but it's got very noxious fumes to it. And the window is not very big. She suffered a lot to make that wall. Anyway, most of the time along the length of the wall, I have notes from the books that I'm writing. But what you saw was a collection of cards that had odd names on them. And the names are names of books that I'm writing. Let's see, 24 books that I'm planning and in the process of working out all of them at the same time. So that's what I showed you in the last video. I showed you my plans. It's going to take me about 5-6 years to write all those books. Once I get started writing again. And that will be some intense stuff. I could explain the plan and what it's going to look like when I'm done with it. But what I found out is that when I start talking about the master plan for my work, not only do people's eyes glaze over, but they stop taking me seriously. It's a mad plan, and I'm just not going to get into it. There's no wisdom in it. Nobody thinks it's possible, so everybody kind of loses interest and loses respect when I start talking about it. So no more. From now on, you see what I show you. Okay, so I am going to show you a picture of my desk right now. You're going to see a couple of interesting things. Nothing too interesting. My big metal mug. It was actually bought for the goat party by a friend of mine named D. And and he left it with me. And I've been using it off and on, but that's the mug that he drinks from when he comes to the goat party. We're gonna have one again soon, but first we gotta do a bunch of other things, and some more people need to get vaccinated. Okay, so I show you something from my office every time. Last time I showed you something from the table between the chairs. I showed you a little dinging bell. I'm gonna show you another one. This is my hear ye bell. Or that's what I call it, because it's hear ye, hear ye. Reminds me of the movie Robin Hood, the Disney movie. There was a guy that went through, I want to say he was a possum, but I could be wrong. And he yelled out, "It's 3 o'clock and all's quiet." Anyway, it's my announcing thing. So if you're at my office and you have something important to say, you're supposed to grab the hear ye bell and ring it, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna set that right here so that you can look at it for the rest of the episode. Okay, so the plan today is to read a another piece from the aftermath of Guardians War. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how the GoFundMe is going, that I set up so that I could go talk to Bramble's grave. And we're going to go from there. But first, this piece. It takes place during a section of my life when I was going through a lot of therapy, and we were dealing with a lot of different things, and we were learning more and more about the ego states. And anyway, so I'm going to get to that. I'm going to pull it up and do the reading, and yeah, then we'll see what comes of that reading. Hopefully I can pull it off. It seems like I'm stumbling on words a little more tonight than I usually do. Anyway, so I'll be right back. Okay, so this one's called By the Throat, and it takes place in 2001. It was a really intense year for me, and I'm just going to jump into it. By the Throat, 2001. There was a pattern in these things. Job went to work early, either in the morning or the afternoon. He was gone most of the day, no matter what. Chanel stayed home with me. Becca came over around dinner time and stayed for a few hours. I was gone by the time the siren got there at night. Then she would stay until Job got home, and we would hang out with him until he went to sleep. Every time anyone was around me, we were working on my altars. The entire day was about me. I was asked 1,000 times a day how I was doing. Did I need anything? Was I upset? Do I want to talk about it? Is there anything I want to, is there anywhere I want to go? All of this, all the time. Try to imagine the kind of love or obsession that it takes to allow one person to rule every waking moment of your day. I was not their child. Yet they treated me like that with that level of care. I was their entire life, and they lived like that for months. Chanel and Job pulled away soon for hate of Siren, but the whole group was told the same thing. Stephen made it very clear pretty early that I needed to focus on myself. He told me that for a while, everything needed to be about me. Everything. If I needed everyone to leave, they all needed to get up and do it. If I needed to be taken somewhere, that was where we went. If I needed to talk, watch a certain movie, everything needed to be about me for a while. He told me to sit down with all my friends and let them know all this, and if they would allow it, let them in. But if they can't agree to it, then thank them for their honesty and send them away. I was dealing with things too important and too sensitive to allow other people's needs to get in the way. It was terrible and I hated it. I involved myself in other people's lives and I cared about their needs as much as I could, but at the same time, there were times when I needed to take over, and I did. When I was living with Job, my favorite part of the day was hanging out with Chanel and Becca when they would come, when she could make it. It was the most fun, most informative, and we got the most done. I sat in the lazy boy. They sat as far away from me as they could on the couch, and they fought the war of my mind. They pulled up altars out. They talked to altars, and they were always safe and careful about it, until the night that Teth snatched Becca into his claw. Teth had been out the night before. He had walked up to Chanel and dropped on his knees and smelled her stomach. She hugged his head and said yes, that she had not told Job yet. She was at the time 6 weeks pregnant. He asked her if she wanted to know if he smelled like a boy or a girl. She said no. Teth had been out the next night. He had talked for a long time about young things and the need to protect them. He had talked about a land they could not name where massive wolves roamed in enormous packs and he was their alpha. He described things that no one had ever seen. And he almost ate a moth. It fluttered through the room and Becca cringed back. She's deathly and irrationally afraid of moths. No one knows why, but she is. So when it fluttered by and she cringed, she cringed back, Teth stood up and with a snap and a twist of his wrist and fist, he had the moth in his hand. He went to pop it in his mouth when both women yelled out, "No!" He looked up at them as if they were crazy. "Please don't eat that," Becca begged. "Please, Teth, don't eat that moth." She was nearly frantic, nearing the breaking point. Her fear-addled mind could not bear to see the man she loved pop a moth in his mouth and devour it. Teth looked from Becca, shaking his head, and looked at Chanel. Chanel shook her head. "Pretty gross, dude." He looked at his hand and opened it, seeing the moth still struggling. It was still alive. He licked his lips and reached his hand to his mouth. This is the most bestial part of myself. You may not know that. I don't know how much information you have about Teth. Teth is the most bestial part of myself. He's more animal than man. He is the ego state, the altar, I guess, is what we're calling them now. They used to be called ego states, but they've changed it now and they're calling them altars. The Teth was the altar that was most base. He was all about survival, eating, drinking, shelter, sleeping, sex. He was most about the base survival necessities. So he is more animal than man. "Please, Teth, no," Becca yelled. Then Chanel laughed. Teth laughed. It was the first time they'd ever heard him laugh. They had not even known him capable of any expression but intense fire. When he laughed, he held his hand to his mouth and Becca cringed. He pulled it away and she sighed. He held it to his mouth again and she cringed again and he shook his head. In the end, he dropped the moth in an ashtray. He did not eat that moth. However, he didn't lick his hand where it had died. So there's that. When Teth pulled out came pain. Payne had not had a good day. Child had been out earlier and had been meaning to Payne's bear. Child had a teddy bear. It was big and fluffy and yellow, and it meant the world to him. He loved it and carried it around with him everywhere. Payne, also being a child, wept one day that he didn't have a stuffed animal. So Becca had brought him the maitre d'. She gave it to him and introduced him as D-Bear, told him that it was hers, and now it was his. She said he could keep it forever if he wanted to, but it was capable of a lot of love, so be careful, she said with a wink. Well, Payne loved it. I want to remind everybody that the slightest caress felt to him like a punch, like a lash. When he wept and he sobbed, there was no helping him. If you reached out and made contact with him, he would scream in horrible pain. There was no way to show physical love to Payne, but this bear could. Child called his bear Victor Bear. It was named after one of Job's Dungeons and Dragons characters. Payne called his Victor Bear too, but Payne had been crafted when we were 3 years old, so he was not good at pronouncing things. It came out Vicar Bear, and it was his therapy toy. Well, Child would come out and grab his bear and swing it around for a while. Then he would see Vicar and put his down. He had a tendency to take Vicar by the legs and bang him on the ground, to throw him around and hit people with Vicar. He stepped on him and he kicked him. Now I am Child. My name is Adam now, and I run everything. I've been writing this autobiography, and I have to take the blame for this. I will say that it was abusive. I'll say it was a terrible thing to do, but I will try to explain that Vicar Bear was, in my mind, a lesser thing. My bear was beautiful, and I hated sharing my room with that tattered old bear. Just seeing it pissed me off. I was in the middle of playing, so I didn't listen to anyone, and all knew that if anyone laid a hand on me, they would be dealt with by assassin or guardian. So everyone was helpless to stop me from abusing that bear. I had a pretty good life. All of these altars that I loved shielded me from the horrors of my abuse, but I do not walk around with much shame. But I can say that about this, I am filled with shame. About this small stuffed animal and the way I treated him. I'm ashamed of myself. Payne deserved better than that. I just didn't realize what I was doing. So that day had been terrible to Vicar Bear. And I'd stuffed him under my bed when no one was looking. And when Payne came out, it was gone. He frantically searched for it and he cried. When they tried to comfort him, he screamed. See, it's not their fault that they did that. It's second nature to see a loved one crying and rush to physically comfort them. Every time Payne came out, someone would grab him. They all knew the rules. They knew it was supposed to be hands off, but they still couldn't deal with the sight of a man they loved weeping in the voice of a child in pain about the terror of his life. Try to imagine the horror of that, having to stand by and do nothing while the child suffers. With the night that Teth almost ate the moth, Payne came out and he started crying. He sobbed and he wept and he begged them to protect poor Vicar Bear. He grabbed a nearby roll of duct tape and he pulled it as he cried and wrapped the end around his thigh. He's wearing blue jeans and he started wrapping his leg in tape as he wept. And he screamed for help for his bear. The only thing in the world that he knew loved him. Becca stood up. Chanel grabbed her and pulled her back down, but Becca brushed her off. Do not touch him, Chanel said. I know, I won't, Becca said. She neared us and crouched down by the chair beside us. It's okay. It's going to be okay, she said. I'll talk to Child about it. It's going to be okay. No, he'll hurt Vicar, Payne sobbed. He'll hurt him. He'll hurt him. Payne was losing control. He dropped the tape and he punched himself in the head. Becca grabbed his arm. Then from deep beneath, Teth roared to the surface. He jumped up and grabbed Becca by the throat. He slammed her against a nearby wall and he snarled on her face, pressing his mouth almost touching hers. Instantly, she dropped her gaze. She looked to the ground and turned her eyes. She held out her hand to Chanel. I got it. It's my fault. Don't move. It's fine, Becca said. She went slack. She didn't drop to the ground, but she relaxed her entire body and waited. Teth snarled and roared a few more times. Then he smelled her. He smelled her again. On her, he smelled himself. I have talked to him about this moment quite a few times, and the answers I've gotten have been cryptic at best. He said aloud about how he smelled himself, but it was not him, that he sensed his warriors. He says that she was not alone, said that she had them with her. He said a few times nothing more than to come. It is unclear as to what he smelled when he smelled her, but I can say that if you ask me, I think he smelled Rafe and Tobin. Years later, Teth would come out around the boys when they were just infants. He held them high above his head and he presented them to the 4 cardinal directions. He blessed them in his way and he pulled them down and smelled them. When he did that, when Teth had his sons in his hands, he said, "You came." Okay, so that was the reading for tonight. I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk about Teth. I think I'm going to read you another story about Teth so you can truly understand maybe what he was like. I might read 2 stories about Teth. Teth is he's really intense. Anyway, we'll talk about Teth for a while, and then we'll get on with the rest of it. I'll be right back. Thank you. Okay. So this story takes place, I think maybe I was in 8th grade, probably the summer between 8th grade and 9th grade. I had started hanging out with Dee. And he was my whole world. And it'll explain more about that in the story. But this is the first time we saw Teth. We didn't know what we were looking at. We had no idea at all. But I'll read this, and then I'll read when we discovered him after the after we found out that I had the ID. Teth, part 1. You have to understand, he was my world back then. His name was Dean. He was my best friend. I had grown up a mongrel, always hated and misunderstood, friendless, and begging for people to be nice to me, begging for anyone to hang out with me. I was reviled and abused by my peers all my young life. So when the most popular kid in 8th grade wanted to be my friend, it shattered everything. I had a talent. I could create fantasy on a whim. We played a game called Dungeons and Dragons, and I was the master of the story. I gave the game plot and form. I could play anytime he asked me to, and I could play as long as he wanted me to. With that ability, I had bought my way into the most exclusive group in the school. He was the one ray of light in my life, the one thing I had never expected that made everything good. Life was great. I was Dee's best friend. He was attractive and well off. His dad was a powerful man in the city, and our fun was boundless. He wanted to hang out with me all the time, and he made it all better. Unless you've gone from the other dregs to the cream in a matter of days, you can't understand. I was bound to him. My fate was tied to his. When I saw him in sheer agony and dying, I lost touch with myself. Harmony Baptist sponsored a youth folk trip every year down one of the area's rivers. Canoes, picnicking, sunscreen, and water. It was a day I dreaded. Every year I told my mother I didn't want to go, and every year I had a blast. This year, I had talked Dee into going with me. We shared one canoe with him, me, and a friend. We paddled up the river and had so much fun. Bright sunshine, bubbling river, laughing and joking around. It was the perfect thing. It happened so fast. I don't remember exactly how it occurred. There was a log with water running over it, a downed tree in the river, and we hit it. We went sideways. The boat was suddenly being pressed against the log. It was going down. We started grabbing our stuff, and I jumped ship. The water was shallow enough to stand in, but I was terrified because I couldn't swim. Soon I heard Dee yell out for help. Then he was begging. I turned from the shore and looked out over the scene. Horror bubbling deep, somewhere deep within me. The canoe had tipped on its side. It was being driven against the log by a press of water that flooded the canoe, jamming against the fallen tree. Dee's leg was between the log and the canoe. It was being crushed. He could not escape. He was trapped. 3 grown men were there in a breath. They gripped the canoe and fought to pull it away. They struggled for a long beat with no results. As I waded back in to stand beside the tree, helpless, as I stared at the leg and listened to the wide, yawning cry of my best friend. They fought the current for a long time before they budged the canoe. It went under the log, getting caught in the bulk of the tree. He was pulled under with it. In the span of a breath, my entire world was drowning. Next thing I knew, the water was high up to the middle of my chest. I tried to walk away, but I was trapped. My legs had inexplicably been driven deep into the soft riverbed. The entire crowd was gone. Upriver, the canoe was being hauled out of the water, and Dee was on the opposite shore, being hugged by a group of girls. The rest of the float trip was a blur. Faces of awe and fear stared at me from all sides of the river. The youth counselor would not look at me. Everyone seemed terrified of me, with one exception. Every now and then, my best friend would look at me. He would look at me and shake his head. He told me he loved me over and over that day. When I broke down in tears for no reason I could name, he hugged me. He told me he was my friend for life, vowed to be there for me always. When I was getting in my car that night, his mother pulled up in her van and got out. She grabbed me in her arms and told me she loved me. She said, "Thanks for saving my Dee's legs." I just cried. I had no idea what she meant, no idea how he was saved or what had happened to him moments before. About 15 years later, I heard the story of what happened that day. Becca and I had gone to Pennsylvania to visit Dee on our way through to other destinations. We were watching a movie. I said, "Damn, he's strong," referring to the actor in the movie. Dee shook his head. "Not as strong as you. There is no man as strong as you." I laughed, said something degrading about myself. I thought he was making fun of me, but he wasn't. "I remember that day. I will never forget it," he said. When I asked what he meant, he told me this story. He said he had given up, knew he was going to die. He was under the water, looking up at the world, and he saw me scream. I'll use his words. "I saw you look at me and roar, man. You just roared. I looked up in shock as you began to rip that tree to pieces. You raged and you screamed, and with your bare hands, you ripped that tree to kindling. I felt the pressure on my leg ebbing, and I watched amazed, as if you were gripped by some beast. With your bare hands, you saved my life. That was the first time anyone had seen that beast in years. It would not be the last. Okay, so may say it in here. Let's see. Yeah, it does explain in here. Once we found the altars, we started learning as much as we could about them, and it'll explain in here how we did that. This is the story of when we discovered Teth and when we talked to him for the first time. It's called Teth Part 2. Are you Jack or are you real? The beast asked Job, who was sitting on the edge of Job's bed, its head low, its claws biting deep into the side of the mattress. I was not aware. It was a Tuesday. Siren and Becca had gone home to sit by their phones. I was drinking and calling them all night. I used to do this every Tuesday. They would go home and I would call them and they would talk to drunk altars and take notes and write things down and come and talk to me about it the next day. And that's how we learned what we learned. I shuffled through the usual suspects: Shadow, Guardian, Pain. We had seen Adam and even talked to Assassin that night, but by the time this thing had crawled up out of the foundation, they were all wasted. This thing was immune. This thing was not human. Well, shit, man, I'm not Jack, Job had said. He leaned on the door and pulled out a cigarette. Flick as a Zippo brought fire, and the beast pulled back in fear. Been at work all night, but I know you have been too. Who did you see tonight? Alone. You, me, it said. I don't know you, do I? Job said. Growl. There was a low and slow, a warning or promise, a sign of terror to come or of pain. Job laughed. Yeah, that's not necessary. Come on, let's get a drink. He turned and walked away. With caution, the beast followed. Job looked around the room, seeing empty bottles and half-eaten food, and he grinned. You guys have been hard at it tonight, huh? Just got here. I see. How much have you had to drink tonight? They drink. True. What about you? How drunk are you? No drunk. Has no effect. For the weak, the beast said. And those of us just off work, Job said. He saluted with a bottle of Gentleman Jack and poured. What do I call you? Teth. Do you want to put some clothes on? Job asked. A grunt was his only response. Job shrugged. I'm headed outside. Nice night. Want to come? Teth nodded. When he hit the open air, he loosed a shuddering howl that soared through the night to echo in the city around him. He reached up, faster than lightning, and snatched the moth out of the air. The beast popped it in his mouth. Okay, Job said. They walked to the steps, and Job looked at Teth. So who are you? They're going to ask. Broke free tonight. Free of what? The earth. Broke free from the earth. The ground in the wasteland. I broke it. I crawled loose. I've been here before. He looked up at the sky, but I don't recognize the stars. Job took a drag off his cigarette and nodded. Okay. He pulled his pack and lit another off of his. He handed it to Teth. Teth took it in his hand like a weapon and sniffed it. He pulled back in sudden fear. Fire, he snapped. Yes, indeed. We've mastered fire. No one can master fire. Fire by its nature has no master, Teth said. Like Shadow and me. Shadow. Teth nods. He make me laugh. Wild as a sea, just as dangerous. Teth, what do you do? What are you about? Life, survival, force, and balance, protection, destruction, innocence. I came here to protect innocence. Adam, Job said. Yes, but before, eons ago, when time was new. I broke free from the crust of the world and was given purpose. This is the body that I found in this life. This is where I'm needed. You're talking about other lifetimes. You're talking about old soul kind of stuff, Job said. Teth nodded. Some of us came from long ago. Some are new. You are old. You are my Kef. I would know you anywhere. We'll get back to that, Job said. What do you want now that you are out? Survival, food, drink, shelter, warmth, sex. So you're the base needs kind of stuff. Grunt. Cool. Why do you look stronger than Jesse? Job asked. Your muscles are more defined, your body hair is standing on edge, and you're comfortable in your boxers and nothing else. I've never seen Jesse out of his shirt. Too much clothing, too much binding man down. How do we run when we need to? How do we eat, sleep, or even walk wearing all these clothes? Have to come off. This, he pulled out his boxers. Even this is too much. Why have you not taken it off? Don't get me wrong. I want you to keep it on. But why haven't you taken it off? Adam might wake up, Tess said. Too much for him. I see, Job said. What did Siren say when she talked to you? Teth shook his head. You didn't talk to her? Teth put his fists together as if holding something with both hands. Then he snapped them, breaking it. You want to break her? Teth growled. I feel you, partner. I'm not a fan, Job said. When was the last time you were out? Treat. Treat, Job said. I don't know what that means. Tree and water, boy drowning. I broke tree, Teth said. You must protect the young, must protect the weak. I have no idea what you're talking about, but it sounds like a good time. When will you see you again? Teth reached out fast and snatched another moth out of the air. Job coughed. Please don't, he laughed. Just for me. Please let the moth go. Teth wept that on the stairs. Better alive anyway. Another beast had awoken. It was a leader in its own right, a being of instinct. We would learn that it was fearless with the exception of fire. It was immune to cold. It was immune to liquor. It could not be reasoned with. It could not be stopped. It spoke in ways we didn't understand and about things we cannot imagine. It was old, very old, and it knew wrath. It would turn that wrath on the woman we loved. It had raged before. It could do so again at any time. It was the most dangerous thing we had at our disposal, the most violent, most destructive, and most peaceful creature any of us had ever known. It was Teth. And it had crawled free. Okay, so that's all that I'm going to tell you about Teth. I'm going to come back in a couple of seconds for you guys, a couple of minutes for me, and we'll talk about Teth a little bit longer. We'll talk about By the Throat, and I will go from there. Now, if you have any questions about Teth, if you have any questions about anything that I've read on this channel or that we've talked about on this channel, please ask your questions in the comments below and I'll address them. But for now, I'm going to take a break and yeah, we'll go from there. Okay, so let's talk about Teth. everybody has a beast inside. uh, if you haven't seen yours, I suggest you find a way to find it. You got to find a sort of freedom that you've never felt before. It's going to give you uh, the right to do things you've never done. I was talking to my therapist, Stephen, and we were talking about death one day, and he says, and I was talking about how he has a craving. He has a craving that I couldn't fulfill. He wanted ham. It doesn't sound that outrageous, but Teth doesn't use utensils. Teth uses only his hands when he eats. So what I was talking about was getting a ham in front of me, reaching in and grabbing it with my fist and eating it, forgetting all about what is happening here. No napkins, nothing. It dripping on my clothes, so I couldn't wear clothes. It's covering everything. A level of savagery when eating that I had never felt before. I told him that the craving was real and that Teth was thinking about it all the time. And Stephen, every now and then he would tell me to succumb to my madness. And so Stephen told me to just do it. Just get rid of everybody. Cook myself a ham, set it on my counter. This was back when I had an apartment in South Towers. Set it on my counter and let Teth do whatever Teth wanted to do. So I did. I don't remember it. I remember the shower afterwards, but only kind of. Only in the way that you remember a thing and then quickly forget it. It was a jelly ham. About this big. I don't know how we did it. I remember that when I saw it afterwards, what he hadn't eaten, the carcass of it. Carcass makes you think bones. This didn't have any bones. But the carcass of what he had left behind was so savagely ripped into that it scared me, knowing that something within this body had done that. I threw it away. Now, this was not a time when I had any money, so throwing away food was just unwise. But I threw it away. I took a shower. There was ham in my fingernails that I had to clean. but I had a manicure kit, so I did that. There was ham between my teeth. I got that all out. And I felt this great sense of fulfillment, as if my entire body, imagine if your body is just a shell. My entire body felt like it had been filled with muscle. No organs, no bones, just solid muscle. I had reached a core within myself. And Tef had gorged himself. After the shower, laid in bed for a while, I felt a certain level of exhaustion that I hadn't felt before. Just like I just laid there, stared at the ceiling. I don't know for how long. Recently, I've been feeling that urge again. What I'm craving now is chicken. You may not know this, but in my opinion, chicken is the perfect food. I cook it in so many different ways. Had it tonight. I cook it in so many different ways. And this time, what I'm craving is that rotisserie chicken that you can buy in Walmart. I want to buy one of those. And I just want to slide it to death. Let him do with it as he will. What will end up happening is I'll get gross by human standards. He'll rip the legs off. He'll rip the breast off. He'll rip the entire thing to pieces. And he'll make a mess of himself. He'll make a mess of everything around him. The table will be a disaster. It'll be, the sauce from the rotisserie will be everywhere. It'll be caked into my beard. I don't want to do it. But I think about what Stephen would say. Sometimes you just have to let yourself go mad for a little while. So I think Stephen would tell me that it's the right thing to do. I've mentioned it to Becca, but I haven't pushed the issue. I think this video might push us over. If it does, I'm not going to tell you what happens. That is between Tef and Becca. I'm not going to tell you what it looks like. All I know is that he feels a need to grab things with his hands and devour them. If you try to find the beast within you and give it room to run, you might find yourself doing things that you can't explain, that you don't want to understand. I say, my advice to you would be to explore it. Everybody has a child. Everybody has an adult. Everybody has a lover trapped within their body that they need to find. And also, everybody has a beast. After I had the ham and I ate it, devoured it, I felt a great sense of calm that I hadn't felt before. All rage washed out of my body. All frustration was gone. It's a kind of meditation nobody talks to you about, because meditation involves finding inner peace. And what I'm talking about involves finding your inner monster, your inner beast, and letting it roar. And when you're done and that part of you is sated, you find a kind of divine peace that you don't find any other way. I'm going to go Christian on you. If you feel frustration in your life, if you feel tense, if you feel overwhelmed by that, then God is telling you to express that rage in a safe way. He doesn't want you to go out and beat on something. Maybe he does, a punching bag, but there's another way to do it. To just let the beast out and let it fulfill itself. So I challenge you to do that. Teth gorges himself on ham. It was a mess. It involved cleaning up after ourselves. It was scary. Afterwards, we had to take a full body shower and lay in bed and try to figure out what we felt. But what we did experience was a level of calm that we'd never had before. If you need permission to let that beast roar, I hope you can let me give you that permission. Find the thing in you that needs to express its rage and needs to express itself and let it gorge on whatever it is that your body needs. Okay. Sex with Teth. We don't talk about sex here. We never have. Sex with Teth is extremely passionate. When you express it, your partner needs to open themselves up to whatever kind of expression he needs to. Teth loves Becca. And so what happens with Teth when he has this expression of sex, what happened with him, I sleep through most of it. There's a bestial aspect to it. She holds him and allows him to sate himself on her. And I've talked to her about it a lot. She feels like it's sweet. She feels like it's tender, no matter whether it is or not, because the part in me that is in need can find itself fulfilled by experiencing her body. There's something tender in that. No matter what the sex looks like. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. It's none of your business and you don't want to hear about it. I'm going to ask you to find the creature within you that craves, the creature within you that roars, because everybody has it. No matter how in control of yourself you are, no matter how cerebral you are, there is a thing within you that wants to roar. I'm gonna tell you one more thing. Recently, my wife released a video. It was a compilation video of her entire season of Hairbrush Poetry Jam. And we were sitting down, me and her, and we were watching the entire thing. And what it is it's just one poem after the other with no explanation and no. I'm gonna link it down below. I want you to watch it. And when you watch it, there's a poem in there called The Moon, in which she describes herself as the sea creature coming up to the surface of the water and witnessing the moon. We were watching that together. She sings that particular poem. We were watching it together. And when we did what she says, I didn't experience it. The shift was too strong from the altar you're seeing in front of you into Teth. The shift was too strong. But what she said happened while we were sitting here in my office right here. I was right here. There's an easy chair right here where she's sitting in. While we were watching her sing the moon, Teth came out and he howled. He howled. And he howled on key with the song she was singing. Because Becca understands the animal, the creature within her is a Leviathan. And I understand that the creature within me is Teth. And those two entities have a relationship in themselves. And when he heard her sing as the Leviathan coming up from the water to witness the moon, he howled to her. I don't remember doing it. She tells me that he did it, and she knows that that part within her felt loved, and she felt as though it was very sweet. It was an expression of love that he could give her that nobody else could. Okay, so that's Teth. That's the explanation of by the throat. Pain was in distress. You can't touch Pain when he was like that. She did. Teth responded in a way to protect him, and he had her by the throat up against the wall, and he smelled our children. This was in 2001. Rafe was not born until 2006. I'm not asking you to believe that. I'm not asking you to believe that Teth dropped down on his knees and he smelled Chanel's stomach and he could smell that she had a 6-week-old baby growing in her womb. I'm not asking you to believe that he could smell the sex of that child at 6 weeks. I guess what I'm asking you to believe is that I believe it. Because that's the most I can ask from these videos. It's for you to believe that I believe it. And that in believing it, I find peace and understanding for the life that I'm living right now. All right. That's what I have for you tonight. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to tell you about the GoFundMe that I'm running. And I'm going to ask for donations for it. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to do if I get extra money from it. I don't expect to, but if I get extra money from the GoFundMe, then I'll tell you what I'm going to do with it. Anyway, let me get it together and I'll be right back. Okay. So if you watch my last video, then you know. Bramble is my father. I released a blog blast, what I'm calling a blog blast. And it is a number of blogs telling a story of how I discovered that the man I was told was my father was not. I've been talking about it for a long time on all the videos from here to video number 4, episode number 4 on last season. I'm not going to get into it. You're probably tired of hearing about it. And I'm trying to move on from the discovery section of that. But I can't make peace. I have things I want to say. And the man has passed away. For Father's Day, I've decided that I want to go up to Milwaukee where he's buried. And I want to talk to him. There's things I want to say. Questions I want to ask, and maybe somehow I'll find an answer. I need about $1,000 to do this. So I started the GoFundMe, and I started the GoFundMe, and I don't know, I didn't know what to expect, but by the end of the first day, I had 3 donations. That moved up to 4 very shortly after that. 5, 6, 7. And now I'm very close to my goal. My goal is $1,000. I need $1,000 to make this trip. And I'm nearing my goal. Wow, the outpouring of donations, the people who have helped me, just make me feel so loved and understood. I feel like they are giving me something that I can't give myself. These people are amazing. Well, if I get any more than 1,000, whatever I get, I want to give to a small charity for child abuse. I'm going to tell you a story that I haven't written in my autobiography yet. I'm hoping to. I might write it tonight. So when abuse was discovered in my family, it was not my abuse that was discovered. It was the abuse of my sister. So the police questioned me. I told them nothing had happened to me, that it wasn't important. A guy who was my stepfather at the time, which we'll call Mumble, made me, in a conversation, he made me realize, he made it obvious to him that he did not want to hear if anything had happened to me. He only wanted to focus on my sister. I think he was too weak a man to look at a little boy who had been molested. And I'm not going to use the word molested. I think the word molested softens the reality of it. He didn't want to hear that I had been raped. And so he phrased his questions in such a way that it let me know that I was supposed to hide what had happened to me. I was questioned by the police. They didn't buy it. I was sent to a psychiatrist and she didn't buy it. So she asked me, my mom, if I could come to a event, not an event, a weekly meeting of children that had been abused. And I did. It was underfunded, as a lot of these situations usually are. It was underfunded. And I walked in, they had crafts for us to do, they had activities for us to do. There was about 6 other children there, 7 maybe. And I saw this girl. All I remember of her was that her hair was about this long. It was straight, curled up at the end. She was very cute. I was in 4th grade. She was probably in 4th grade. And I was instantly drawn to her. Nothing so crass as boyfriend and girlfriend. There was an attraction that I believe was core deep. I don't think it was, I think it was innocent, but it was core deep. She could see in me that I had been hurt. I could see in her that she had been hurt. We were talking, we were hanging out. There was a table over here, a big room, a television that was never on, love seat, couch. Right here against the wall was a closet. And over here was Punchy. Punchy was a giant panda, a giant stuffed panda. He was called Punchy because you were supposed to go over there if you were feeling frustrated, if you were feeling pain, you were supposed to go over there and punch him. And Punchy had so much love in him that he could absorb your pain and you could give him your pain. That's how it was described to me. So we're talking, we're hanging out. I see her twice. And then she walks over and she touches my arm. And then she leaves. And she goes into the closet. She closes the closet. I didn't know how to express myself. I didn't know how to talk to her. So I just walked over to her and I sat down. I said, I'm here. She stuck her hand under the door of the closet and I laid my hand on it. And I just sat there and leaned up against the wall. I didn't know what to do. She didn't know what to do. We didn't have any tools to cross the distance into a conversation where she would explain what had happened to her. I could explain what had happened to me. None of us had any tools. We were in 4th grade. So she sticks a scrap of paper under the door and I grab it and I open it up and inside it says, he hurt me. And Guardian was awoken. He didn't know what to do, but he did. He got up and he went to Punchy. And he just started working this panda. He just started punching it. He started beating on it over and over again. One punch after the other, and he started roaring. Then he started yelling, not her, not her. Punchy ripped right up the middle. What came out of him was what you would expect from a beanbag. Just tiny little styrofoam beads. They just poured out of him. And he's kneeling in front of this thing. There's everybody in the room is staring at him. He's got beads up to his thigh, laid out everywhere. And he turns around and he looks at her. He looks at her. She's come out of the closet and she's standing there. Closet doors still open, staring at him. And he turns around and he stares back at her. I don't know what she was going through. I won't try to guess. But she was aware of his anger that she had been hurt. Well, my mom came and the people in charge pulled her aside. And I told her that I lost my shit. Described the whole thing to her. They didn't know about the note, but they described the whole thing to her. And that was the last time I was allowed to go to that. My mom yelled at me. She was like, what if they make us pay for that? Panda. All that kind of stuff. I never saw that girl again. I never saw those people again. I never went to that. It was all over. I can say that that girl knew that her pain had called up outrage within me. I can say that somebody fought for her in the only way that they knew how to. Okay, there's a reason I'm telling you this. My goal is $1,000. It looks like I'm going to reach my goal. I'm going to extend this GoFundMe as far as it would go. I want to talk to you about a place called Isabel's House. Isabel's House is a very small outreach program for abused children and neglected children. I'm looking at their website now. I encourage you to look at it. I'm going to link it down below. It says number of kids loved, 317. Number of families supported, 157. Success rate in keeping families together, 96%. I'm going to the services sections, and it says reason to call us. Loss of home or utilities, so they help homeless children. Safety concerns in the home. Admission to drug or alcohol rehabilitation. So if the parent goes into rehabilitation for drugs, the child can go to this house and be seen to. Short-term incarceration. So if the parent is in jail, they can take the kid in and take care of the kid. Severe mental, emotional distress or instability. That's that girl and guardian and punchy. Severe mental, emotional distress or instability. Physical or mental health emergencies. If you can't come to us, we can meet you at a medical facility. Domestic violence. They take in kids that are suffering in a home full of domestic violence. Isabel's House offers a warm, nurturing, loving environment for kids. Admission 24/7 every day. Transportation to bring your kids to our house. They'll go out. If your kid is in need, they'll go out, pick your kid up, and take them to this safe place. They provide clothing, food, and medical care during the stay. Drop off and pick up of your kid at their own school. Your kids going to school, they'll provide them the opportunity to get to the school and come back. This is the one that gets me. Resources and support for families to get out of crisis. That's Isabel's House, and it's a small child abuse group in Springfield. I don't want to donate to Boys and Girls Club. They're huge. They get thousands of dollars of donations every year. Big facilities. I think what Boys and Girls Club is doing is extremely important, but I want to help the group, the underfunded group that gave that girl an image of a boy fighting for her. That group had no money. They were operating on minimal donations. Punchy was an old creature. He had barely any fur left in him. And Punchy took the wrath that girl deserved. So once I reach the $1,000 mark, every cent that comes after will go to Isabel's house. Maybe that means $5. Maybe that means no money. I need $1,000 to go talk to my father at his gravesite. Anything that I get beyond that goes to those kids. So I'm going to leave it at that tonight. Do all the things I refuse to say. Do all the things, and I will help me out if you can. Help me out with the Bramble thing. And if we go beyond $1,000, whether it's a $5 bill or an astronomical amount of money, whatever it is, it goes to Isabel's house. It goes to those kids that need help and families that can be healed. Okay, so that's our show for the day. Episode. That's our episode for the day. We talked about a lot today. But yeah, I'll do all the links down below. I'm going to link Isabel's house so you can get a look at it. I'm going to link my GoFundMe so that you can help if you want to and if you can. And that's our show for the day. I invite you to listen to the outgoing bass line that I wrote. Good night.